welcome to Palsies with Palsies. I am Bekah Anderson, your Palsy.
And I'm Justin Hancock, your Palsy. Hello, Bekah.
Hey, Justin, how's it going?
You know, we're doing pretty good on an unusual Wednesday morning record slot for us. This is
this is not our usual time. This feels very strange.
Audience can judge for themselves whether we will be more or less coherent through this space.
No promises either way.
Yeah, indeed. Well, what do we have on tap, Bekah?
Well, today I'm really excited because there is someone else in our Zoom room who's just quietly listening while we say silly things. We have a guest on the podcast today. It's our good friend Dillon. Hi, Dillon.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
We're good. We're so glad to have you here. Dillon, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then Justin and I can say a little bit more about what you're doing here?
Yeah, sure. My name is Dillon Hargrave. I am, among other things, my favorite title is that I am the general utility player for the Julian Way, which Yay! I actually have the privilege of working every week with Justin and Bekah. It is truly the highlight of my week each week. Other than that, I am a consultant for small businesses, startups, and I have also recently launched a peer discussion group for leaders with disabilities. And I'm here today, I believe, to talk about leadership with disabilities, being a leader with disabilities.
Yes. And what Dillon doesn't know is he's falling victim to the fact that if you are the engineer for our podcast, we will eventually ask you to be on the show.
Cannot escape. But no, seriously, yeah. Dillon is amazing. I guess I can talk to you instead of just about you. Dillon, you're amazing. The general utility that Dillon describes is also known as saving mine and Justin's bacon, just every week, reliably. So we could do just an entire podcast praising Dillon, but I expect he would probably leave. So instead, we'll ask him about some of the other awesome work that he does in his peer discussion group and in thinking about leadership and disability.
Thanks. And I would say that just to respond quickly and jump in, Justin, is to say that I'm happy to be here. If you would have waited another week or two without asking me, I would have started being a little salty. So I'm and I could certainly talk about all the amazing things for each of you that have brought to my life. And it is an honor to hear that you consider me as a bacon saver of any sort.
Reliable bacon saver.
Yes, absolutely. And Dillon, one thing we should probably tell our audience as we talk off air is used to the two of us, Bekah and I, talking at each other. And it's rare that we have a third person in the booth, so to speak. So this might be a little bit bumpy. I'm just speaking for myself to begin with. But I think since we are a disability and sort of queer-friendly and queer-centric space, why don't you start us by, like, what is your experience of disability? What is your, how do you inhabit disability? Dillon is a not entirely an awkward way of saying that.
Yeah, so great. And I mean, is there an awkward way of saying that? That's a question we've yet to answer, but I'm happy to talk about it, right? Because I think something that you may or may not have discussed on the podcast before is that, you know, it's been my experience that it's better to be asked than for people to make any kind of assumptions. And I'm happy to self-identify and I'm sure we'll get into the value of that later in the conversation. So I was born with what was described to me when I was old enough to understand as a condition called a right hemiparesis, which I have learned is to describe it to the layman is to say that I had a stroke in utero sometime around the 5th month of pregnancy. There's like a functional neurological condition, something. There's like another acronym I just recently learned about that sounds like it's an umbrella term, but I will say that I've mostly identified within my communities with palsy people. I think it's one of the reasons why I so quickly gravitated towards you, Justin, and a lot of other people in my personal and professional networks. Just because there's a certain crossover with our physical embodiments.
Yeah.
I am married and I have a daughter. My wife and I have been married for almost a dozen years, 12 years. Other than that, I would say that one of the unique things about my experience as a person with disabilities is I've had the privilege to make significant transformations within my embodiment over the course of my life. And as a result, oftentimes when I talk about leading with disability, the automatic response I get from people is like, well, I would have never said you had a disability. I would have never thought you had a disability, or what are you talking about, or some version of that, which is always an interesting way to enter the conversation, to say the least. But yeah, so I hope that I'm happy to answer any clarifying questions. As you both know, I can go on forever.
No, it does. And Bekah, feel free to jump in at any time. But no, that's very helpful. And the only thing I will say is, much like my wife, Dillon's wife is great and is brilliant. And so we both have the common experience of marrying up, which I encourage all to do when it's possible to do so. But that's a different show. So
I'll just make the obvious joke that I am marrying up in quantity as well as quality.
Ayo.
We've been outdone again, Justin.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, no, thank you for sharing all of that, Dillon, and yeah, I think you and I and Justin have talked a lot about the way in which experiences of disability and how that changes over time, and how we experience ourselves over time shapes how we show up in different spaces. And so I think one thing I'd love to hear you share more about is say a bit more about your peer discussion group, Sauntermore, and maybe like what is the need that you saw that you're trying to meet in creating that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm happy to do a kind of a brief journey over the timeline of Sauntermore and kind of up to where we are today. And really, the idea of Sauntermore started, and I actually bought the domain sauntermore.us back in 2018. I was coming off of a season of my life where I was heavily engaged with transcendentalist literature, specifically Emerson and Thoreau. I know that there's a very specific way to pronounce his last name, and I hope I didn't butcher it. There was an essay called Walking, and it just kind of talked about being out in nature and really celebrated humans as a part and parcel of nature. And not to get like overly academic with it, I think there's a correlation with a lot of the foundational principles of the Julian Way and the teachings of the Julian of Norwich that I think really encouraged me at that point in time to focus on the quality of my relationships with others. And I specifically had made a commitment to be the most Christ-like partner I could be in all relationships around that time. And what I didn't expect to happen when I made that commitment was that I was really called to start focusing on myself first, and specifically how I related to my own embodiment. I started really diving into healthy practices and what that meant, and kind of turning over all the rocks around activity and rest and play and all of these things. And in 2019, I was fortunate to, my wife and I were fortunate to have our daughter, Camila, and that kind of transitioned into, okay, how do I really focus on strengthening my relationships with my family, specifically my wife, daughter, and my mom at the time, who were the people closest to me, my tribe, as I currently describe them. So, fast forward a couple of years, I quit my job. I had a full-time job, and I had a successful hot sauce company that I shut down and quit in 2020 because I really wanted to focus on strengthening those relationships. In that process, I started volunteering for the Julian Way, and then made a stronger commitment of support to that organization. And I had to spend a lot of time thinking about, well, if I was going to do something that I was intrinsically motivated to do, that I could commit to 100%, and that I could create a 10-year plus goal around, what would that be? And what came to me after a long period of thought and discussion and conversation with my mentors was a peer discussion group for leaders with disabilities. And that's how we got to, that's the quick and the dirty of how we got to Santamor today. And Santamor is a place where we bring together leaders with disabilities who want to build a powerful network of colleagues to learn, share, and grow together. And that's really how we identify who's a good fit. And we do this so we can define our life, career, interests on our own terms, successfully navigate transitions to new heights, and to build a community that gets more valuable with each new person who joins. And, I will only close my introduction to Santamor to say that I've been tremendously encouraged by the Julian Way and empowered to take this leap through my experience in that community. So I just wanted to take a time to express gratitude to both of you who have helped provide, light on the path, if you will.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think I speak for both of us. I said, like, it's been an honor to be with you on part of this journey, and to watch Santamor grow, and to be able to see this, thing that has been, a long time developing, start to come into its own. And yeah, I'm hearing in what you're saying, Dillon, the sense of like wanting to show up for others in the best way you can, being the most Christ-like partner in any relationship, but also realizing that needs to mean working on yourself and being the best for yourself that you can be, and developing these qualities within yourself. And I'm hearing that in what you bring to Santamor, that by bringing together these leaders with disabilities, and helping them learn to cultivate their own inner qualities, but in community with one another, in order to show up as best they can for one another, and then beyond that into their lives. And I think that's just such a wonderful way to approach things.
Yeah, Bekah, and thanks for clarifying what you heard. And I would just wanted to go back to, you asked about the need, and I didn't to forget that. So, how I identified the need was, again, kind of through a series of personal experiences. And ultimately, this sheds better light on how I found the Julian Way. And that's to say that whenever I was at the helm of my last business, which was a hot sauce company, I had some partners, and we were in an annual strategy retreat. And at the end of the retreat, the proposition was made to use the brand to promote disability awareness. And at that time, like in that moment, I had a wave of shame just rush over me, because I realized that nobody in that room, except for maybe one person, like knew that I had lived with a disability. And I was ashamed that I had underplayed that part of my identity to that point. You know, I was raised by and large in an environment that, if not explicitly, implicitly had taught me to, when in doubt, pretend I was able-bodied and white, which I now identify as neither. In general, right? These things are contextual, but what that ended up leading me to do was a big deep dive on what are the needs for people like me, and you know, to put the label on myself as a leader living with a disability. That's what I was most interested in seeking out. And I will plug the Julian Way book as a way to understand like all of the different intersections and models of disability that I didn't know at the time. But what I did learn was through a series of exploration of different organizations. I actually had traveled halfway across the country to visit one. And when I got there, the person I spoke to said, "You need to speak to this guy, Justin Hancock, in Dallas." And I said, "Oh, Dallas, that's a lot closer to where I live, and also back halfway across the country." So when I got home, he connected Justin and and I really kind of found that this is the bleeding edge of what I think is valuable social justice work and around you know, being a leader with disability and creating a better narrative for how we work together and create a space for ourselves. And ultimately, the need I found that I believe Santromore fills is just a way to say, using a term that I'll borrow from Justin, that the ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act, is the floor and not the ceiling. If we're going to design something for us, it needs to be designed by us. So I want to create leadership models that are designed by us, because I ultimately believe that that will create greater access for people who don't even know that they can take advantage of it at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. All of that. I'm hearing so many different things in there, and different directions that we could go. And like, you know, so I think to just name some of them, that like, you know, that sense of shame around disability, and then like realizing like, oh, I need to explore this. I need to identify with this, or need to, you know, integrate this more into my life is something I so relate to. You know, I've talked on this podcast before about having a similar imperative growing up of feeling like I needed to try to appear able-bodied as often and as best as I could, and coming to realize like that just really wasn't serving me, and was really doing a disservice to myself and to other folks with disabilities. And so I'm hearing like, you know, Santromore as a place to, you know, help people explore that, and say, you know, that this is a space where you can name your disability. You don't have to work in an environment where you never disclose that to anybody but one person. And then also that sense of like, you know, we need more accessible spaces. We need a world that is filled with all of the access and joy that we can imagine, and who better to build it than us, and how do we get there? You know, leaders with disabilities need to be equipped to do that, to be bold in all of the changes that we can make and the things that we could design.
When you were telling this story, Dillon, I was compelled to sit in that moment at the hot sauce company when you had that experience. And primarily, I think the three of us have discussed, both on air and off, in various contexts having a similar disability experience growing up. I mean, for my, just to kind of contextualize and set myself in the narrative, mine never felt hostile towards disability. Towards disability, but mine, I was surrounded by able-bodied folk, so I just sort of like said, this is the golden mean, and here I shall stay, and here I shall strive, and that's just sort of what carried me along through my narrative for really until I was 30. I was married at 26 in 2008. So until I was about 30, really, was this disability is a part of my life. I'm not ashamed of who I am, but I am not going to center myself. And I know for me, it took the influence of finding another adult human who very clearly lived with disability and was not in a hospital or in some sort of state of medical crisis to sort of awaken my own place in the disability community. So I guess my question around that long rambling and back to the story of Dillon, when you had that moment of shame and or recognition, was it instantaneous for you, or was it did it sort of dawn on you over time as a process, or both?
I bet you can both guess that I'm going to choose the both and. Because yes, I mean, instantaneously it was like, I mean, it was instantaneous in the way that, like, you know, there was this the sense around the table that I got, and again, this was just from my own projection of the situation, where there was like, oh, this is like, you know, there was an element of like of pity, right? And I was just like, well, does anybody realize like how hard I've had to work to build this company, and you guys are now all reaping the fruit of it? Like, what do we want to talk about that? You know, it's not just about, you know, how do we you know, donate, write a check to like the largest you know, most well-known organization, oldest organization that helps people with disabilities. And ultimately, I think that they were mostly thinking about developmental disabilities, just to name it, right? And so it just, the immediate response, to be specific, was like, how do we define disability? And I even asked my partner at the time, who I launched the company with, who has his own challenges that I won't, you know, name here or tell his story. But I asked him, I was like, do you identify as having a disability? You know, he's like, oh, well, he gave his answer. And so I started immediately kind of just trying to figure out how I defined it in my own mind. And that unfolded over time to, you know, I think the other emotional anchor on that, like, lineage of experience was, you know, when I got pulled in to the same boardroom and I kind of had gotten my wrist slapped about a personal photo, a photo I put on my personal Facebook page, where I was you know, topless, I guess you can say it, where I was wearing a Speedo, right? And the person, my partner at the time, didn't think that was appropriate. And right, and I just had this other reaction, because I've been further along in the journey. I was like, you know how hard it's I've had to work to get that body, and like I can display it any way I want to, right?
Yeah.
You know, but that felt like more of an oppression than even the suggestion to support, you know, and highlight disability, because I willingly and do not regret diving into the opportunity to use the brand to promote disability awareness in any way possible. Let's be completely honest. But when you talk about my personal experience and that timeline, those were the two major anchors. It was like, what does it mean to me to identify as having a disability? And then to what degree do I have, have I earned the right to display my body how I want to, right? I mean, that's a very nuanced and complex Venn diagram of situations, I'll admit. But I hope that clarifies kind of what you were asking, Justin. But I would say that on an even longer timeline, I think we're all still asking those questions. I mean, on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing that's funny about that is in your answer, which was great and exactly what it needed to be, you gave us 7 podcasts ideas within that one answer, because I did not start the Julian Way wanting to do economic justice. Economic justice found me because I wanted to do disability ministry. I did not start doing disability ministry in order to talk about bodily autonomy and the connection and tension between that and community. Bodily autonomy and the connection between community found me because it's all of a piece. And the only other thing I would say before I invite Bekah back in to the conversation is that it just strikes me the humor in this, both in the way that you found the Julian Way, Dillon, is you found the Julian Way because a buddy of mine who was in Portland at the time and still is told you, hey, you should talk to this dude in Dallas. And what a turn, like that 5-minute turn turns the cosmos. So I guess I would say, that really just, I'm thrilled by pulling on one thread and then the rest of the world sort of unspools before you. And that's just, we're very careful around here how we talk about deity and, because we got listeners who are Christians and of all stripes and all types, but it really does, something's going on when we can sort of unspool the thread, and it's cool to hear stories like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm hearing in all this how everything is connected to everything else. We as people, the ways that we get connected to one another feel just so incredibly serendipitous. But then also these ways in which leadership and running a company gets connected to questions of bodily autonomy and to questions of like, who are the leaders in the room and what does it mean to give money to the disabled? And Dillon, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but part of what I'm hearing in this story is that like it sounds like that boardroom was kind of framing things as like, we've got this success. How do we share it with other people? How do we share it with different people who are not us? And you were suddenly like, wait, but like, is it us?
Yeah, that's exactly it. How did you get inside my head 4 or 5 years ago? How did that happen? Why do you do that all the time, Bekah?
No, but I think that makes so much sense that like, that's something that I think about all the time when I'm reading disability theology that's written by non-disabled people, which is a whole episode that we could do as well. But like, there's always that us and them language going on of, the we is the non-disabled people and the they is the disabled people. And I'm reading as a disabled person going, I'm not in this we. Like this, and you're talking about me, and I don't necessarily identify with all the statements that you're saying as definitive. And like I think it can feel really disconcerting to be in that space of somebody has drawn lines of where is the non-disabled space and where's the disabled space, and those lines are never as clear as they think they are. There's always there's always disabled people present in a space where you think they aren't. and there's not such a clear, like, we are the ones giving to the disabled people are contributing.
Yeah, I hear that, and thanks for clarifying. And Justin, I just wanted to just touch back, because I feel called to, this experience of how we met, and the details that are left out of that is that I was staying in Portland on vacation. I was way across town, and I got up early, and my wife was sleeping in. By any other standard, I probably could have or should have been sleeping in. But I decided to hop on a bus and go over there and take a meeting. It took a lot of me deciding to do things that like weren't really practically laid out for me to do. And I can't define that other than, as being called to do that by God, right? However you want to name her, and so I think that is also, as we're having this conversation, for me is like the seed of my leadership as a person living with disability. I mean, because there's the public transit aspect of it. There's this like overcoming like all this ableism stuff just to even get there. And also just, the willingness to find somebody to sit in a room who isn't, like using Justin's terminology before, isn't hospitalized or otherwise in some kind of medical crisis. That was such a unique experience for me at that time.
Yeah, that's amazing, Dillon. And I'll just sneak in one more comment to say that, like,
yeah, sure, go ahead.
I think that feeling of connection and of meeting one another, I don't know that I would have named it this way at the time, but like, I think I definitely felt a strong sense of call when I started really interacting with other adults with disabilities as well, in the sense that, and I think I heard this in what you were saying earlier too, Justin, that, when I was growing up, there was always a sense of like, okay, like I need to advocate for my own accommodations, but like, I don't want to do it too much because I don't want to center myself. I'm trying to be, somebody who doesn't take up more space than I should, quote unquote. And, so like, if this thing isn't fully accessible, it's fine. I'll deal with it. And then as soon as I was in community with other disabled people, I was like, oh no, they need these things. They need access. And then I was like, oh, maybe I also need access. Like, maybe if I think these things matter so much for other people, if I feel so called to do that for others, maybe that means the things that I need are also important.
Wow. I was just reflecting on, well, so many things, as I said before. We're trying to be aware of time and recording in the middle of the day in the midst of other meetings. So this might be slightly shorter than we'd want to go. But just to say, folks, it just hit me as Bekah was talking and reflecting on what Dillon had said. These are the two people in this room on this podcast with me right now, with whom I have the most bananas connection stories in my life. And that's a whole podcast in and of itself. And Rebecca and I have mentioned on this, I kept trying to tell Rebecca no.
I remember that.
Yeah.
And God would not let me.
Every time we talked, I was like, yeah, no, there's not going to be another conversation. He's going to be like, yeah, this is no. And then you'd be like, like, let's stick. And I was like, okay, I'm not pushing this.
So it's so strong. And what you said, Rebecca, that evolving sense that it's so much And I think that's how sneaky justice in the hands of God for this context can be. Because we start out like as disabled people, I think, doing emotional origami and trying to fold ourselves in so many pieces where we're the smallest possible presence on the universe stage that we can be, and we're willing to help others, and we begin to unfold and then God goes, no, these are those people are important, and I'm glad you're here to steer them, but I need you to know that this is not just for them, or maybe not even primarily for them. These are your needs too. And so, Dillon, I'm just curious. I know Santamore isn't in its infancy per se as an active process and group, but I'm going to ask you to dream with us for a bit. If we take you 5 years into the future and God is like, hey, Santamore was a win and it's thriving, what is it doing in 5 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I will buy myself some time to think, to say, like, it's a question I ask I ask 4 or 5 people a day about their businesses. So you would think that I'd be more prepared to answer it, but no, I can speak true to my heart, right? So, I mean, the idea behind the Santamore model is that, once we get to 10 people in this initial group, and we're meeting with any kind of regularity, 10 active participants, we want to spin off into to other groups and to other communities that maybe meet in a different location or a different city or a different state. And in 5 years, to dream big and to take all of the governors off, if you will, the engine, and to just throw a bunch of jet fuel in there. I would say we would be well on our way to being one of the a tool for one of the leading consulting firms in the world. And what I say, and that may sound like a big departure, but what I really expected and what I really vision for the Santamore project is to say this, is that we, as members of teams, as communities and families, we are all currently going through a major transition coming out of the pandemic. We are almost always, and in my life, and I think we are all of an age to say, the rate of change in technology is kind of creating this constant sense of transition. And if we're going to develop systems, particularly people systems, to manage kind of this constant transition, we need to completely rewrite the rule book. And so my goal is to have all of these Santamore groups influencing how all organizations, how all communities, how all teams, and how all families interact with each other. And I would like to think that in 5 years, we're well on our way to achieving that.
Wow.
Amazing. I love that. And I am so here for this world. And if other people listen to the show are also here for that vision and want to know more or want to know how to get involved, how can they reach you, Dillon?
Yeah, so I think the best way to find me is through the website, santamore.us. It's SAUNTERMORE.US. That's the website. You can contact me there. I'm easy enough to find. You can search me on Facebook or Instagram. If you know Justin or Bekah, feel free to reach out to them and they can connect you to me. But I'm available. And if there's one thing I like to do more than anything else, it's to connect with others. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Well, as we land the plane and on this portion of an ongoing conversation, I'm sure this episode sounds like nothing more than a beginning and a conversation we will return to again and again and again. Because I'm just, Bekah and I've been privileged to be like side along slightly voyeurs to this process and peek in the window and go, Dillon's doing some cool stuff. I wonder what that part of the machine is over there. But it really, I'm amazed at the scope and the vision and the hospitality that you demonstrate in the center of all of this is really amazing. So don't go anywhere, Santamore, or keep growing and just know that we'll be back.
Yes, absolutely. We will definitely bring you back, Dillon, to tell us more about how it's all going. So thank you so much for joining us for the beginning of this conversation.
It's been a genuine pleasure, and Justin, I want to leave the listeners with a little taste to say next time we talk about it, you can start reporting from inside the machine, and we can have a different conversation, and you can let me know how you think it's going.
Yes,
there you go.
100%, my friend. Well, guys, as always, thanks for joining us on this journey. You can find Palsies with Palsies on Apple Music, Spotify, Simplecast, Google Podcast, soon to be Amazon, probably within the next week or so, Amazon Music. Basically, anywhere you can get podcasts, and we are expanding every day as by the grace of God our audience continues to grow. But it's been such a joy to be with you. As always, go out and put some good into the world, and just be yourself for the rest of this week. And thanks for coming along for the ride, guys. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.